Hi, everyone. I've heard a lot in the news in the last couple of days about these drones or so-called drones over U.S. bases, and actually just I don't know if they're all U.S., but U.S. and perhaps U.K. Military bases in the United Kingdom. At least 4 bases that I have been able to find have tracked them. One is RAF Lakenheath, you have RAF Mildenhall, RAF Fairford, and RAF Feltwell. These are incursions over that restricted military airspace by unknown aerial vehicles. This is something the U.S. Pentagon has confirmed. They are calling them unmanned aerial systems or drones. Basically, everyone's calling them drones. They have been at least at times in multiple amounts. We're talking even perhaps dozens at a time or more than a dozen. So quite a few, very well coordinated. This has been going on since late November, a couple of weeks ago. And as I'm speaking here, it's December 3rd, 2024. This is a thing that's still continuing at this time. Some of these bases have the capability of either nuclear weapons or nuclear delivery systems like F-35s or B-52s, that type of thing. So it makes this a very, very serious matter. And there's a lot of other weird things about these drones. One, despite multiple sightings, at least 5, maybe 6, maybe more, as of my speaking right here, as that many, and yet none of these devices have been recovered, at least officially speaking. So there's really no concrete evidence about what they are, who made them, what they even look like. And the Pentagon is not giving any information about this whatsoever. I mean, there has been no description physically of what these drones are, other than at least a couple of reports said they were in multiple sizes and configurations. What does that mean? Well, size is pretty straightforward. So, but that doesn't really even tell us very much. And then configurations, does that mean the specific configuration of the drone, or maybe formation and configuration of flight patterns? That could be what they are meaning here as well. It's not really clear to me. There's very little information that the Pentagon or the UK military or UK authorities have given up over this. Now, what we can tell is that these drones, let's just call them that for now, have demonstrated some very impressive capabilities. I mean, they are able to penetrate restricted airspace repeatedly. It is believed, and I think this is a reasonable possibility, that they would have a fairly decent range, particularly if they're coming from offshore. Endurance, they appear to have been able to be in the air for quite long periods of time, and presumably able to evade interception or engagement by military personnel. They have been observed performing coordinated, and I guess we could say persistent operations. And the word swarming has been used. So there's that whole thing going on. So this is a really big challenge to any of the security measures of these military bases. In terms of how this has been responded to, the U.S. Air Force, General Pat Ryder, gave a pretty long press conference on this. You can find it. It's on YouTube. You know, they've acknowledged all this. They're saying this has happened and that they are actively monitoring the situation. I think that's the phraseology that they're using. And they are very quick to emphasize that none of the incursions have affected the operations of the base or the facilities or any of their assets and so forth. And the Air Force also stated that they're working with local authorities, local UK authorities, to address this. I don't know what they're doing in that regard. In terms of the origins, there's all kinds of speculation. Um, the Pentagon has been, I think, pretty careful not to accuse any other nation, basically thinking Russia or maybe China in that regard. Both of those nations do have very good drones. Russia's been using quite a lot of drones in their war in Ukraine. Would they be bringing these drones over the UK? Well, Russian and UK relations are at probably the lowest point that they've been maybe in many generations. They're terrible, frankly. So is it impossible? Probably not impossible. Would they be doing these drone incursions in this way to trigger or to annoy or to spy on the UK, presumably nuclear assets? Maybe. Seems like a stretch to me, but you can't rule anything out. Again, there's really there are some videos that are out there. It's really hard for me to know if those are legitimate videos or not. I don't know that any of them have been actually confirmed. And so I'm hesitant to go by some of the video evidence that is out there. If they do get confirmed, fine. You can write a comment below to tell me. I'll look for that. But as far as what these things actually look like, we don't really have a good description of them, only that they have been in multiple configurations, again, whatever that means, or their specific performance capabilities have really not been addressed, but it does appear that they have significant capabilities. Now, one thing that, is always forgotten when we hear anything having to do with UAPs in the news these days, one thing that's forgotten always is the history. History is always forgotten. And I just want to bring up the fact, and this may be related, this may not be related to what we're currently seeing. Nevertheless, there has been a long history of incursions by UFOs, let's call them UFOs, since that's what they were called for decades and decades, over U.S. and also other national military installations. Probably the most interesting series of them that took place over United States military bases might be the ones that happened during the later part of 1975. We're talking 49 years ago. And between October and December of that year, really late November even, you had a series of unidentified aerial objects that breached the airspace surrounding quite a few very strategic U.S. military bases, primarily that were housing ICBMs, that's intercontinental ballistic missiles, and other, sensitive assets. So you had actually two that took place at Loring Air Force Base in Maine. That's in late October of 1975. You have a very low flying craft that was tracked on radar approaching the base from the northeast, actually from Canada. Witnesses did see this. They did describe the object. It had a white strobe light. It had at least one red navigation light. There were attempts to communicate with this craft. It was unresponsive. It actually at one point was seen hovering low, maybe at an altitude of 500 feet or less, over the nuclear storage facility at Loring. It actually, I think on the second night, that object was over the base for a total of up to 7 hours. The base went on high alert. You had alarms blaring. They could have made a movie about that Loring encounter. It was that amazing. And then the next thing they knew, it fled the scene. It was gone. Didn't seem to be in any kind of stress. It just did what it did, hung out over the nukes, and then was gone. Over at Wurtsmith Air Force Base, that's in Michigan, on October 30th of 1975, you had an airman seeing a low-flying craft with running lights near the base perimeter. This object was very stealthy. It was kind of snooping around Wurtsmith, hovering over here, hovering over there, apparently silent, or maybe with the slightest bit of hum noise. but it was not easy to determine if it was actually giving a noise. That's how quiet it was. Highly maneuverable. Interesting thing about that incident is that there was a KC-135 tanker coming into Loring, and was a big tanker. It's not a fighter jet, but it was asked to pursue or at least investigate or get close to this object. So the object then took off and went south down Lake Michigan, and the KC-135 tanker followed that object in a real cat and mouse game. At a couple of points, the object seemed like it split into two and rejoined as one, if that's what it did. It never allowed the tanker to get closer than a certain distance, and then it took off. One of the men in the aircraft was interviewed by the base historian about this later, and he said, "I know this may sound crazy, but we saw that object just taking off, doing more than 1,000 knots, more than 1,000 miles per hour." Now, considering that the object had been hovering and maneuvering very slow over the base previously, that's a heck of a performance capability right there, back in 1975, no less. But there were other sightings in that wave during 1975. One was at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. This was in the early part of November. You had a bright, silent object, I guess you could say buzzing by the base at fairly low altitude. Ground observers were able to describe it. It was very bright and very close. Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota reported a UFO near the base, not much in details. And then at Malmstrom Air Force Base in November of that year, a series of rather awe-inspiring incursions over that base by unknown objects that played cat and mouse games with interceptors, as seen by people on the ground. Totally outperformed, outclassed anything that we could throw at them. So, and then there was also an undated incident at Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, sometime around that period, where you had a missile launch crew reporting alarms being triggered at a Minuteman silo, while above ground you had security police looking at a very bright white object just lighting up the countryside and hovering over the silos. It's crazy. So basically, that's 1975. That's half of a century ago. You had, in other words, low-flying, low-altitude flights over sensitive military installations, unpredictable flight patterns and behaviors. Radar systems were not able to maintain continuous contact. These things were stealthy in terms of radar systems and electronic detection. Lack of communication, lack of identification of these, and some very, very descriptive witness, very good witness descriptions of unusual objects, like how these things look very unusual. But it wasn't just 1975. You know, there's an interesting case, several that took place in the UK in the past. People have all heard about the Rendlesham case, of course, from December 1980. There's a pretty interesting one from 1987 at a place called RAF Bulmer. In July of 1987, you had this is in Northumberland in England, you had a flight lieutenant named A.M. Wood, saw two bright round objects hovering, not super low, but not super high, maybe about a mile, 5,000 feet altitude. That was corroborated by radar data from two separate sources. One was the base radar there, and another one was at RAF Stakston Wold, so a secondary radar. So here you've got the object was described as being 4 to 5 times the size of a helicopter, so pretty large. The objects, there were two of them, they were seen to separate from each other. They were said to have been able to change shape, or at least that's what it looked like. One of them put out these protrusions like arms and legs, or at least it resembled that. Very, very strange. But you had very credible witness there, a trained military officer, and you had corroboration by multiple radar systems. Pretty interesting sighting. The fact is that in the history of this phenomenon, there have been countless accounts of incursions by stealthy, sneaky UFOs or UAP over sensitive installations. This is not a new thing. And so that's just a little flavor of the history that I'm talking about here. So going back to the current drone, if we want to call them that, incursions, we need to recognize these drones exhibit certain behaviors that are consistent with UFO reports going back decades and generations. These drones also exhibit unusual behavior, flying in coordination over several days, penetrating restricted airspace, apparently, we'll say, evading interception. I say apparently because I don't think that's been confirmed, but you would think we're talking about something that's going on day after day. So whatever we're dealing with, there's a level of sophistication here and a certain complexity. So it does make us wonder if these might not be ordinary drones. There may be something beyond that. Also, unknown origins. We do not know where these are from. Despite all whatever investigations are going on, the origin and identity of these drones remains unclear. So that, not surprisingly, is going to make us wonder, could they be something beyond Russian or Chinese? Don't know. Too early to say, in my opinion. But they do have, they seem to have impressive capabilities, potentially including significant range, significant endurance, and evasion techniques. I think all of those seem to be in play here. These abilities seem, I'll say seem to exceed those that are expected from commercial or recreational types of drones. And then, of course, we haven't recovered any evidence, at least not officially. So they haven't been taken down. So we can't analyze and determine what they are, what their design is, what their functionality is, and so on. It's really hard to say. I don't want to just jump in and say these are definitely UAP, definitely UFO. I think that is it's premature to say that. I'm looking for accounts that describe really extraordinary performance capabilities. There is a video that I saw circulating out. Again, I don't know if this is legit or not, that, if true, would seem to show a drone hovering and then moving off very quickly in response to what appears to be an aircraft on approach. If that's a legitimate video, I would call that interesting. If we can confirm that these drones actually have been able to evade interceptions, or let's say attempts to shoot them down, or attempts to disrupt them by electronic warfare means. I mean, you would think that electronic countermeasures would be able to deal with these. But again, you really have to wonder how good U.S. electronic countermeasures really are in the current situation of warfare as it exists at the end of 2024. You could speculate that if these are Russian, that they have superior electronic countermeasure systems in place, which I think many people do think that they do have better electronic countermeasures in their drones, but I don't really know how superior, if at all, that those happen to be. So if these drones are able to consistently evade any and all attempts either to intercept or take them down, we have to start wondering what they actually are. And if they are Russian, well, that's just one more escalation in the completely deteriorated relationship that we have already been seeing between Russia and the West. It's not out of the question. It is possible. But what we really need is a little more information. I'm very hesitant to jump in and say it's one thing or it's another thing. This is a fascinating development, without a doubt. And I certainly am sure that many of us are going to continue to monitor this one. I'm going to keep looking at it And as soon as there's anything else that's interesting, I'll gladly jump on and share whatever it is that I'm able to learn, or anything else that's interesting at all. So that's it. I don't want to take any more of your time with this one. I'll be back with more updates in the near future, I am sure. I guess I'll say, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share. You know what to do. Do visit my website at richarddolanmembers.com if you're interested in other things that I am up to. And that's it for now. I'll see you all again real soon. Take care. Let's keep fighting the good fight. Bye for now.